Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting podcast. I am your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and I am excited, I do this all the time, to introduce you to my new friend, Elise Buellesbach. Did I say that right, Elise?
You were so close. It's Buellesbach.
Buellesbach. Okay. And I first met her, this beautiful young lady, on the stage at the FARE Food Allergy Summit this summer. And she was getting an award for being let's see what it was. Young Leader Award for her work as a college student with food allergies and celiac disease. She's fighting for people to feel safer and feel more comfortable in food service and on campus and just in the world. She is a poli-sci major at American University. Go American. That's where my niece goes to school as well. And she has the hope through her poli-sci degree to create a systematic change and a more inclusive world. Love that. She has food allergies and celiac disease, and she has worked on lobbying initiatives, built the Food Allergy Research Caucus, and is currently pushing for dining changes at American University. Hello, Elise.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, when I saw you on stage, I ran up front and I'm like, I got to take a picture of this young lady and see what she's doing and make sure that I meet her. So I'm so glad that we connected. And from what I saw at that conference, you are a force to be reckoned with.
Well, thank you. I'm just I kind of got thrown in the deep end with food allergies, having them. And so it's been an opportunity for me to embrace that and try to make some good out of it.
Well, and that's awesome. So tell us, when did you get diagnosed with food allergies and celiac?
Yeah.
Were they separately?
It's a saga for sure. So I was first diagnosed with my egg allergy upon first introduction. I was like a year old. So I've had my egg allergy essentially my whole life. That I don't know another world. I was not diagnosed with celiac disease until September of when I started kindergarten, which I have to say, looking back, I think my mom deserves so much credit because that was not easy for me. I cannot imagine what it was like for her, sending a kindergartner to school with newly diagnosed celiac disease. And then I actually, several years after that, was diagnosed with a poultry allergy. So I don't eat chicken or turkey as well, which that's actually kind of a funny story because my whole life growing up, I had my egg allergy and I was like, I can't eat eggs, chickens and eggs. Obviously I shouldn't eat both. Middle school Elise was like, I understand how basic science works. This doesn't work. And my mom was, no, science shows the protein between eggs and chicken are different. You can have chicken. And I was like, no. And so when we were at the allergist, we were explaining this to her and she was like, let's test it. Sometimes the kid's right and they just know something intrinsically. And lo and behold, that test came back as a positive for a chicken allergy. And so that's kind of a funny moment, but that's
chicken before the egg before the chicken, that
I know, exactly.
So, and with your egg allergy, can you eat it in baked goods or is it completely, you have to avoid egg altogether?
I am 100% egg free. There's no egg in baked goods, no cross-contamination. Egg allergy, I carry my EpiPens for that. I have, it's an anaphylactic allergy. Chicken and turkey is a little less severe. And then obviously celiac disease is a whole nother biological beast. I don't carry an EpiPen for that. But in terms of the day-to-day management of it, celiac disease and food allergies are very similar. I'm sure there are biology kids out there who are like, no, don't. Come on. And but in a practical sense, they're very similar.
Right. Exactly. And that's different from celiac, for everybody to know, is different from a wheat allergy.
Yes,
and I'm glad you said it was a different biological thing because celiac is more of your digestive tract, whereas food allergies are your immune system.
Yeah, I always like to break it down almost there are tiers of gluten-freeness. There's a gluten intolerance. And there are a lot of people who are gluten-free because it's an inflammatory food, because it's highly processed, whatever the reason. And then there's wheat allergies, which this isn't necessarily in terms of severity, but just like the different categories. And there's like the wheat allergy, which are IgE mediated. It's people reacting to the protein of the food. And then you have the celiacs of the world, like me, where it's, a digestive issue where it's like the villi in my small intestine will lay down and no longer absorb nutrients if I'm eating gluten. And so then there's like, it's a different biological thing, but I think like in terms of how we move through the day to day and the advocacy work that we do, it's all very similar. And so I'm always a big fan of, combining groups and like working with the celiacs and the food allergy groups together.
Oh, high five, girl. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I agree. And it is very much, the day-to-day is very much the same, as understanding how to avoid that cross contact and understanding what ingredients are in foods that you're eating, et cetera. But, that biological aspect is just a little bit different. And I do love the fact that you said, your villi goes flat. And I usually, when I'm talking about it, I'm like, it's like a piece of paper, right? It goes as flat as a piece of paper and it doesn't do the job that it's supposed to do, which is get the nutrients to your system and things like that. So I love that you described it. Sarah Matheson from Hungry Harry's is on here listening to us. And she's like, what an advocate. So high five again to you from Sarah. And my friend Lynn is on here. She's like, I don't like eggs. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I unfortunately eat eggs almost every single day, but so I will make sure that I wash my hands and, before. And so actually I want to ask that question. Are your allergy, is it triggered from consumption, touch, airborne if somebody's cooking scrambled eggs in front of you, and same thing with chicken?
So both allergies are just consumption, which is really nice. Although I will admit that there's logically, I know that I won't react unless I, eat the food, but being in a room full of donuts or pizza, those two foods in particular are very scent heavy for me. And it's really overwhelming to be in a room full of that. So while I know I'm not going to have a reaction in that space, I definitely don't like to put myself in a room full of, donut eating friends, because that's just a lot to manage. It's a very crumbly food. It gets everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I worry a lot about that, but it's, I think growing up with food allergies has become, about all of these little practices that keep myself safe, about washing my hands, washing every utensil again. I'll go to my friends' houses and I'm still washing utensils again. And people are like, do you not trust that I know how to dishwasher works? I'm like, no, it's not personal. I just wash everything twice. And so it's little things like that I've really developed to be able to work around having all of these allergens.
Well, that's a very interesting concept to think about, because, and what my other niece that doesn't go to American, she's like, if you put her silverware down on a table, and she doesn't have food allergies, but if you put it down on a table, she wants to make sure that it's got a napkin underneath it or a plate underneath it. Right. So in that same kind of concept, you just want to make sure that those utensils are clean, or if you're at, and ironically, Tess, my friend, who's a caterer in South Africa, just popped in here and she's like, this is a reality. But for caterers and food service to think about the utensils that they're using, and or somebody going through a buffet and there's the salad with eggs on it or chicken in it, and there's a salad without, and somebody's using the tongs or to pick up the salad.
Yes, exactly. That is something that I've seen so much. And I go to Chipotle a lot because it's there's no eggs on the line. And so I feel pretty comfortable there, but I'm I need you to get the rice from the back with a clean spoon, because that spoon has touched every burrito tortilla that has come through the line. And it's little things like that. I no longer get cheese because they put their hands in the cheese, and I'm all, no, don't put your hands in the food. But even on campus, when I used to eat in the dining hall, last year they moved to all professionally served. So there was a server at every station who would provide the food and would scoop the food out. And they were very clear that at the station that I could eat at, the G8 station, which was free of the top 8 major allergens, that you had to have a fresh plate every time you got food there. You couldn't bring a plate with food from another station and get food put on there because of this cross-contamination risk. But that was originally a move they made in terms of the pandemic. And they actually moved back to self-serve this year. And it was something that a lot of us in the food allergy community were like, no. We want this pandemic era invention to stay, because if I know that like a server is going to use one utensil for one ingredient and there's never going to be any switching there, that feels a lot more comfortable than knowing that like a student grabbed a spoon from, the salad, dumped it in, the cheese bucket or whatever, if you have a dairy allergy, and then put it back, because that's like a real concern. And so I think that, I love your comment on how the utensils, and like, that's something we don't always think about with food allergies because it's an object, not a food, but it's so relevant.
Well, and because and I think it was before we jumped on, but you said, being on campus, you've heard what was that term you used? Like the nuts, not the nuts and bolts, but the
nooks and crannies.
Nooks and crannies. I'm like, those little nooks and crannies can actually cause a reaction in you.
Yes.
And because it's a little tiny crumb.
Right. Absolutely. I was meeting with the dietitian recently on campus, and I asked, like, did we get tongs in the gluten-free bread cooler? And she was like, I don't know. And I was like, these are the little things you don't think about until you have food allergies and you watch every single step of food with a hawk's eye. But it's like, if we have people who can eat eggs but not gluten, stick their hands with eggs on them into the bread bin, like now I can't have that bread, or vice versa with someone else's allergies. And so it's really about thinking, like, how do we create a clean, safe space in each step of the food process in order to allow everyone to eat what they're comfortable with.
And that means, meeting planners, caterers really have to think through that step. I mean, they think through the standard steps of doing this, but if they've got that separate bucket of food or cooler of food, let's not say a bucket, cooler of food for individuals who have food allergies, you have to have those separate utensils, because that's a really important step in that. Because again, using your gloves or using your, utensils from another dish doesn't work.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully they're learning that in food safety handling. But again, sometimes that gets lost in the process, and it's another thing to think through. Right. So working on campus, I want to jump to this one question first, is like, so I named this session, where's my little banner, lobbying for systematic change in food service. So, which goes with what you're doing on campus. So tell us a little bit, what does that mean? And besides changing utensils and thinking through that, but what does that mean for you, and what would you like to see be done?
Absolutely. So I think for me, like, if I look at lobbying, that's about like using my voice. That's about speaking up for the needs and wants that I have for my basic health and safety. But to me, like, the key piece is systematic change. Is that when I first got to campus last year, they created a different way of eating for me. And they were like, okay, we'll put you on a separately prepared meal plan. So they'll make all your food separate in the back, different from what everyone else is eating. And that worked for me for a period of time. And I'll get to why that didn't work. But when other students with different allergies then asked for that same accommodation, they were like, no, we're not doing that. That's not a thing. And I was like, and so what I see a lot of times, and not just in the food allergy world, but across, is we really try to solve problems like one person at a time. And sometimes that's really important and that really works. But with like college dining on campus, if 10% of students have food allergies, you can't be doing this on a, individual by individual basis. We have to be looking at this big picture, and how do we create a system that inherently accommodates people with, whether it's food allergies, intolerances, religious or honestly voluntary dining restrictions. There's a lot of people who can fit into this category of eating different foods and needing a safe preparation space. And so how do we do this, programmatically rather than in a slapshod manner?
Oh, I love that. And it is looking at the menus in a systematic approach and the overall. And what I like to teach meeting planners, this is looking at, okay, so you've got somebody that's allergic to escargot or pineapple or whatever. Those are easy ones to completely eliminate from the menu, right? And not
I'm
sure
a big
how many
fan
people
of that.
Yeah.
I love that, because it's like, let's pull it out. Let's make this inclusive all the way around. Like, I love that sort of change.
Yeah, exactly. Now I was looking at a conference this morning, and their statement, it says dietary restrictions. So this is ironic because above it says ADA, and it says, we're happy to align with the ADA. If you're disabled and need additional assistance to enjoy the conference at the fullest, please specify in your registration form. And then below it, it says dietary restrictions. We're happy to accommodate dietary needs within reason. and to the best of our ability prior to the conference. So I'm curious of your thoughts on that wording.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think there's an interesting conversation here that's bigger too, is like food allergies under the ADA are protected. Like food allergies are legally a disability, but so often we have this like disjointed conversation about food allergies in one corner and disabilities in the other. And I will admit, like, I fell prey to that for a long time. I was all like, oh, like, let's support people with disabilities, but I have food allergies. Like, it's and it's like, no. So coming to campus, like in last year as a freshman, I was able to really find that connection between disabilities and food allergies and really start to form my relationship with myself as a disabled person, and to be like, and to be like proud to be like, yeah, I'm disabled and I'm going to still be able to do all these incredible things. And I'm disabled at the same time. Like,
right.
And for me, like I had an allergic reaction on campus in the fall of last year. And after that, I really didn't know how to like move forward with the dining hall with myself. I was all like, what is going on? I'm on the other side of the country from my family and from everything familiar. And so I reached out to the Disabled Student Union on campus and I was like, hey, can you help me? And they were amazing. They really like wrapped me into this group and they were like, absolutely. Like whoever you are, whatever you're coming to us with, like you are welcome here if you want to be here. And I found other people with dietary restrictions, but I also found that like I had a shared understanding with people with other disabilities. Because at the end of the day, we all move through life trying to do seemingly everyday activities that are harder. Right. So for me, eating is a really hard task, but I have to eat. For other people, it's getting into buildings. For other people, it's going to class. Like whatever that is, this shared understanding of like, we need accommodations to go through life and that's okay. And that's beautiful, but we need to be able to build these systems that accommodate us. And that joining that group like really changed how I think about food allergies. And so bringing it back to what you were asked is like, I find it a little disconcerting that they took food allergies out of the ADA and that it was like within reasonable accommodations. Well, eating feels reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like I absolutely understand it can be challenging and it's a real thing. And from the catering perspective, like that's a real challenge. But I think that, having a more cooperative mindset and a more, like learning mindset, I think can be beneficial to both parties. And how do we make sure that everyone can eat? Because that's really what it's about.
Exactly. And you have to go off property or go off campus to go find something else to eat, or you can't spend the time with your classmates. And I think that was one of the things that you had said to me, when asking you about when has food been an inclusive thing? Because you said you've been on campus and you've been excluded from things. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from like day one, I was in a cohort my freshman year that was like, we all had a class together. And so we like did a bunch of social activities too. And the very first social activity is an ice cream social. And I'm like, really? I was at a scholarship event the other day and it was at a dinner. And so like the first conversation is like me putting my lunchbox on the table and I'm like, hey, and I've come to a point where like I kind of make that a conversation starter and I'm like, you know what, let's talk about food allergies. Like, let's do this.
I love
it. So because otherwise I sit there without food and that looks awkward. And so I might as well like own that awkwardness and be like, this is my lunchbox. We've gone everywhere together forever. Like I brought my own food. I have my funny little utensils that I keep in my bag. And for me, like I've kind of like made it that topic because otherwise it is like an exclusive thing. And it's like, okay, I can't participate. How do I own that? Make it like something funny, make it something to talk about. But that being said, I think food, like when it's done right, is phenomenal. I like to tell a story of the first time I ever had birthday cake at someone else's party. Mm-hmm. I was in 6th grade. I had just started a new school. Everyone else at the school knew each other because they had like gone to elementary school together. I was joining in 6th grade and I had known this girl for like 3 months. Her birthday was in December and she reached out and she was like, hey, is there a birthday cake place you can have? And I was like, there's this one bakery in this one town. And she went and she got 2 cakes from there. And that was the only cake served. It was the gluten-free vegan cake. And she didn't say anything about it to anyone else. It was just like, I knew it was gluten-free and vegan. And I ate cake at a birthday party. And that like blew my mind. And it was phenomenal. I mean, even at the FARE conference last month, or last month. I don't know what month it is.
2 months ago, I think.
In
Yeah,
September, like I ate food at that event and I was super nervous and I like asked all the questions, but then I was like, this is safe and this is good. And so I think like food, it's proof that like food can be done right, even with food allergies. And when it is, it's so much more powerful.
And I have to give a shout out because Sarah Matheson, who said that you were such an advocate, it was Hungry Harry's that we had cupcakes. Yes. Hungry Harry cupcakes were made at that event. And the whole event was made top 9 allergen free. Like everything at that meal was top 9 allergen free. And did you go to that opening reception, where they were doing they were doing past hors d'oeuvres and all of those things were top 9. And so it was really nice to be able for people to come through and not be worried about it. Of course, unless they had a different allergen, right?
No, absolutely. And I worked with FARE on the Food Allergy Research Caucus cocktail party they had in May as a part of Courage at Congress event. And I got to like really build that event. But one of the really cool things is that the catering was all top 9 free. And it was really cool to be able to expose like congressional staffers to like, this is real good food and it's allergen free. Like we can do both. Yeah.
And where was that event held?
That was in DC. We had a beautiful venue next to the Capitol building.
Okay.
And it was just really cool to be able to come together and talk about like what we've been lobbying on and all the progress that we've made in the food allergy space.
Okay. So talk about that a little bit because you're studying poli-sci and you want to lobby and you want to get into politics. So what are the rules and guidelines around food allergy? And we've talked a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act and everybody that was eating as all of our bodily functions were added to the ADA in 2008, which that really gave individuals with food allergies and celiac disease, civil rights protections under the ADA. But what other laws are out there and what are you hoping to make change with even further?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like at a baseline, we have to talk about the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act of 2004, which is such a mouthful.
It is.
But this piece of legislation created the top 8 major allergens. And so it established, whenever you pick up a package and it's like the allergens are bolded or it says at the bottom contains, that is FALCPA. That is, requiring the top 8 major allergens to be labeled on all things. And to me, this piece of legislation like epitomizes how important like the government can be in creating an accessible community. Because like as someone with an egg allergy, like eating would be so much harder if I couldn't pick up a package and immediately be like, yes, it has egg or it doesn't have egg. And like that has made my eating habits so much easier. And it really does make a difference in so many people's lives. And the next piece of legislation then really is the FASTER Act, which was passed last year.
Yeah.
And it will add sesame as the 9th major allergen as of 2023. And I think that's incredible. And I think what's so cool about the FASTER Act is like a little geeky moment is the FASTER Act passed with unanimous support in the Senate.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
There were only 7 nay votes in the House, I believe. And what this shows to me is that like the FASTER Act is going to impact 1.6 million Americans who have sesame allergies. Wow. It's going to impact them, but it's also going to impact their families and friends who are trying to help them find food in this world. And it passed unanimously. Like this is the change we can do with like little pieces that are really specific. And to me, like this epitomizes when we talk to a community, when we hear what they really need and the changes we can make, like we can get things done. We can make real impact that betters people's lives in tangible ways. And we can do it now. And so like this makes me so excited as a political scientist because I love talking about that big picture, like how are we going to like reform democracy and all of this stuff. But like those are really big picture conversations. And so to be able to like see change in someone's life within a couple of years is phenomenal to me.
Well, and I was about to tag my friend Roger Rickard because he needs to talk to you because he's got a company called Advocacy for Change. And so he teaches people how to become advocates like you and lobby and things like that. And I think that's what you just said are really important points that he's, I think shared as well, but you're really showing a legitimate, they're all legitimate, but a really pinpointed way in how that has made change. Right. And how that's going to impact 1.6 million people,
Right.
And And that's just the people. And then you've got, like you said, the families, how does that impact that?
Right. Like I know my family avoids all of my allergens too. And so it's like, it really is such a community based thing. And obviously the food allergy community is pretty tight knit. And so it really does impact so many people. And you asked previously, and I wanted to answer this too, like what else I want to see in this space. And I think like at a very personal level, like because I have celiac disease, I can't eat gluten, which is wheat, rye, and barley. Wheat is one of the top 9 allergens, but rye and barley are not. So those can still be hidden in places like natural flavors. And so anytime I pick up a product that says natural flavors, my options are either to put it back, see if it's certified gluten-free, or, like call the manufacturer and see if they know. And that's like a real thing. And we see similar struggles in like food products. So like cosmetics, alcohol, medications, stuff like that doesn't have the same labeling laws as food because it's not regulated by the FDA. But we still engage with that, and we still have to use these products. And so like buying hand soap, I gotta like pull up my phone and like Google hand soap, and like that feels so silly. But I don't want to buy a hand soap that's based on oats and something like that.
Well, and my friend a couple of years ago, we were supposed to be on a Zoom call, and she had told me a couple of months prior to that she was allergic to garlic, and she found it out doing a cleanse, and she doesn't remember ever really eating gluten or garlic her entire life, but she did a cleanse. So she knew she was allergic to garlic, and she actually ended up having to change her favorite restaurant, ended up adding garlic to her favorite dish anyways. But one day she's like, I'm going to be late to our Zoom call because my entire face is breaking out and my hands are breaking out. And it was in her hair product. Garlic was in her hair product, and she didn't know. I mean, so like looking through that and thinking about that aspect of it, it's really kind of scary because you don't know. Right. And there's just speaking of eggs. I mean, I went to an event the other night, and this woman made this beautiful drink, but there's raw egg in it. And I'm not sure that it's probably listed. I don't think she has a cocktail menu. So listed on there, but there was a woman in Europe, in London, who had that. She ordered a drink. There was raw egg in it, and they didn't disclose that on the menu, and she went into anaphylactic shock. So,
and it's even more than that. Like I had a dish. Oh, my camera and I are having a moment. Okay, we're back.
Oh, there you go.
So I had a dish a couple years ago that had a wine sauce on it and had an anaphylactic reaction from that. And going back, like the only ingredient that we could pinpoint that even potentially, I was tested for every other ingredient in that recipe, like top to bottom, try to figure out what was it. And we think it was the wine. And the egg food allergy community has a bit of a mix. Yeah, exactly.
The filtration process.
Wine is filtered in eggs sometimes. And it can also be filtered through like nuts sometimes too. And so it's a real conversation. And I found that I showed up to the dining hall in my freshman year in college, and I pulled up the recipes, and I'm like reading the recipes, and I can look at the dietitian and I'm like, you realize you have red wine in this recipe at a station that's not supposed to have the top 9 allergens. And she's all, and I was all, it could have egg. Like, is this certified vegan wine? Like, have you called the manufacturer? Have they changed their processes? Like, it's a college campus. Like, they're not like it's whatever product it is. It's probably the generic, and that's reasonable. But it's like we can't be using these ingredients. And so I think like having these conversations between the food allergy community and the people making that food is really important, because they're little pieces like egg and wine that you don't find out about except the hard way.
Exactly. And I need to introduce you to Camper English. And he's a bartender, mixologist, educator, and he's got a company called Alcademics, but he also he talks about Feel Safe. I will put that link in here. And so he talks about allergens in alcohol. And then Barnivore is another website too to go to, which is vegan, tells you all about vegan wines and vegan alcohol in general. And I think that's a really, good resource to have when you're looking at it. And, because you don't know. Right. And like you said earlier, the FDA does not require allergens to be listed on alcohol. or whatever entity actually manages alcohol. I forgot the AT.
I think it's the firearms, tobacco, and alcohol, whatever
exactly.
They're called.
Yes.
The strange hodgepodge.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So because, I'm throwing Tess in here because she's South Africa, but in the European Union, and this is kind of going back to lobbying, and I want to be on your side when we're doing this, but in the European Union back in 2014, they required that all unpackaged food served directly to a consumer has to be labeled with the top 14 allergens.
Yes, and they require the top 14 on everything, I believe. Yes,
exactly. So even when you go into a quick trip gas station, if they're serving a hot dog, they have to have the information about the allergens available for you and I to read.
Mm-hmm.
So can we get there here in the US?
Oh gosh, I hope so. I really hope so.
I want to be on your side when we're doing that.
Yes, I think that could be a game changer. And to me, I see the Sesame bill with faster passed, and I was like, yes. But in all reality, the FDA has the ability to change the labeling laws without going through Congress. Okay. And so there was actually a letter, or the FDA has been updating their policies on how and when they add or subtract allergens. And FARE was really active in providing feedback and comments on this draft that the FDA put out. And the idea behind it is that the FDA wants to essentially lower the standard for adding or subtracting an allergen to the top 9 or whatever the major allergen list, which could be really good because it could make it easier for us to get to that 14 threshold if we can prove the prevalence of the next couple allergens. It's also a concern, though, because that could mean that they could pull allergens. And as someone with an egg allergy, 80% of kids it's something like 80% outgrow their egg allergy by the age of 16. And as an adult with an egg allergy, I'm concerned that, that could create change or whatever that is. And so it's really a balancing act of how do we push to get more allergens without losing allergens. But that being said, I really do think that we can get to 14, the top 14. I think, I believe Canada has it, the European Union has it. There's a lot of countries that are doing this very adeptly that are showing us how we can get there and that model for making it happen. Right. And I think, as we watch faster go into action, that'll give us more notes on how to continue to proceed and get all of these allergens labeled. Because at the end of the day, for me, it's about eating safely for me and the other 32 million Americans with food allergies. It's also about eating safely for people with intolerances, people with other medical conditions that require them to avoid foods, whether it's Hashimoto's or EOE or something else, but also about the fact that everyone should be able to know what's in their food. Right. And having that transparency, I think, is really beneficial for us in this community of food allergies, but also for the whole population. And I think if we can have those conversations and get there as a population, that will continue to bring this change.
Well, and that reminds me of going to dinner in DC with one of my former bosses, and she's Jewish, and her questions, and I had eaten with her before when we lived in Atlanta, but going out to dinner with her at this restaurant, she was asking, does the steak have butter on it? Does this have, what kind of broth is used to make this, right? Or is there shellfish in this? So as someone who follows kosher diet, she was asking the same questions as somebody with food allergies, right?
Exactly.
And it was really eye-opening because the servers need to be adept at that, right? As well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So on labeling, when you're going to the school cafeteria or into any of the coffee shops or whatever, how do you want to see those labels to you? I mean, one, you want the server to be able to answer the questions, I would think and hope. Yes. But two, if there's a label there on it, how do you want to see it labeled?
Yeah. I think there's 2 answers to this, and my generation is going to show in this, but my immediate reaction is I've been to restaurants where there's a QR code on the table and you scan the QR code and it shows you all of the foods, and then you can click the expand button and it'll list the allergens in it.
What restaurant are you going to that has that?
Right. It's amazing. I think I went to New York in August, and my roommate and I went to a bunch of vegan restaurants, and they like had phenomenal listings.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Right. You know, they're pretty specialty restaurants to begin with, but they did a phenomenal job of like, you know, you can pull up a spreadsheet and, you know, it lists all the top allergens on one side, and then, you know, it checks them in each of the dishes that it has. Right. And so it makes it really easy as someone with, you know, some of those top allergens to be like, okay, this is safe, this isn't safe. And so I think that's like the gold standard. I think like in a more practical application, I love allergen markings, like on a menu, if it could have, you know, a key at the bottom that says like, oh, GF means gluten-free. And then they put that next to all the things where it's gluten-free, or, you know, a picture of a peanut, they put it next to all the things that contain peanuts. And so that like does a first round of question asking almost for you. And so then I could walk into a restaurant, I could look at the menu, and I could say, okay, these items are marked gluten-free and vegan. So I can probably most likely have them, but I'm still going to ask the questions. I'm still going to talk about cross-contact, stuff like that. And I think that that's a really phenomenal start for restaurants. In terms of coffee shops, coffee shops scare me, especially around the holiday times with the eggnogs. Mm-hmm. I don't go in a coffee shop. But I think like still having like, whether it's the QR code because it's that sort of fast-paced movement within the coffee shop, or, you know, having like on the posted menu in the back wall, like logos for what contains what allergens. I think that would be a phenomenal start. And that's even something I'm pushing on my college campus, is American University contracts with Chartwells to do all of their food. And Chartwells has different like levels of, you know, accommodations and like, you know, embellishments and things like that. And at the level that American University is at, they don't offer allergen by allergen in icons. And we were really pushing last year. We're like, these icons make this menu more accessible, easier to read. It's practical for both the staff, who can then quickly understand what has what allergens, and also the student to have that easy access to information. And they were like, we can't do that because we don't have that package. And it's like, I can empathize to that.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. But also to me, that's like a call out to Chartwells and be all like, why isn't that a part of every package? Like, stick some icons on the online menu. That's not an expensive or hard piece, but it creates an increasingly inclusive place. As opposed to right now, the only icons are gluten-friendly, vegan, and vegetarian. And it's like, those are a great start, but we can do more.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about gluten-friendly or allergen-friendly.
Is that a good word? Those are some of my least favorite terms. I understand at like a legal perspective, people say gluten-friendly because they can't guarantee that it's safe. But to a certain extent, speaking for me personally, you can't guarantee anything. Like, you know, you can follow every best protocol, and there's always still some risk. Like, that's an inherent thing that I move through life with, that level of risk. It's why I carry my EpiPens. It's why we have protocols and procedures, because having allergies means there's inherent risk. But I still have to eat, so I'm gonna eat food. But to me, it's like, I would rather a company be transparent with their practices rather than saying gluten friendly. Like, okay, it's gluten friendly, but does that mean you have a dedicated equipment to gluten-free? Does that mean you have like a table that's separate that's gluten-free? Does it mean you have a different room that's gluten-free? Does it mean you have a separate ovens, or like you have the same ovens, but you like cover your gluten-free stuff in tinfoil? Because for each person, even with allergies, like there's varying levels of severity, and what someone's comfortable with changes. And it feels like gluten-friendly, allergen-friendly is a way of like liability protection without actually providing more information to the consumer. And I feel the same way about precautionary allergen labeling statements on foods, which often those say like may contain, or processed on equipment, or may contain traces of. And this always makes me laugh, because I'm all, what do you mean may contain? Like, did you put it in the food or not? Like, is it an ingredient or not? And so that always cracks me up. But, you know, those are all voluntary, unregulated terms. So I would love to see the FDA step in on what those actually mean, because it would be phenomenal if I could look at a package and I could say, okay, it was made on shared equipment. I don't feel comfortable with that, versus, oh, like this brand has really great manufacturing processes that they talk about how they do manufacturing for food allergies specifically. I feel comfortable with that.
Right.
I think So Delicious as a brand does really a great job, like calling out what their manufacturing are. And practices are. And they're like, we test between every batch for these allergens this way, blah, blah, blah. You can find more information here. And like, to me, that's, again, a gold standard. Like, tell me what you did so I can make that choice for myself, because you can't, make one choice for the whole food allergy community. It's not a monolithic group.
Well, and I think chatting with Sarah from Hungry Harry's as well. So I think she's instituting or already has the QR code on there, but you can also go and look at the batches of the product, the flour that she's making, to see that. And there's a couple of other products. I think it was, not that you're going to eat this, but what's the egg substitute, the vegan egg, just egg,
like
just egg, and they have the QR code on there too, so you can look at it. But I find it ironic that it's actually made by an egg manufacturer and it's supposed to be an egg-free dish. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I found that at the Natural Products Expo. But there's another food service company, and I don't know which one it is, that I see at airport in the Delta Sky Club a lot, and they have the words "avoiding gluten." That's how they're labeling it, and I'm like, again, like, what does that mean?
Right.
And to me, it's that legalese statement that they're not willing to, put this in. But then somebody said also that everything at an airport is processed, right? Or is packaged food, right? But still, you're serving fresh food, what looks like fresh food in your thing. So let's talk about how you're doing it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end. It's 42 minutes here. We do need to talk some more. Love to talk to you some more about this. So what does, as a person, and you're coming to the age, and I mean, you've worked for FARE, so you've had a job, but as a young professional, now I have 3 questions in my brain. So back in episode 130 with Karen, or 140, with Karen Palmer, she is a mom of a food allergic child. And what she talked about with me back in May was, advocating for her daughter going to college and what she needed to do to make sure of, that she would be safe. And you've talked a little bit about, going to the dietitian and going to Chartwell's, but what are the other things that you've learned as a college student that other college students need to know when they go to college with a food allergy?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually got the chance to speak on this at the FARE Summit, but like, my number one thing is make friends with the dietitian. Like, in my experience, and it varies a little bit from college to college, but in general, you have to get an accommodation with food allergies to get, special food, or I hate the word special, to get like safe food. And to me, like, so you have to go through the accommodations process a lot of time. And in my experience, the dietitian really was the one who could advocate for me and could make sure I was getting those accommodations. So when I first came to campus, they told me, you don't need accommodations for dieting. Like, you can eat at the G8 station. It's free, the top 8 major allergens. And I was like, fabulous. I'm allergic to chicken and turkey, which you serve 8 to 9 times a week. And there are only 14 meals at this station. This doesn't work. And they were like, nah, you're fine. And I show up today with my mom, like, we're moving. We've gone to the dining hall. I'm with the dietitian and my mom. And there's nothing I can eat because it's all been put out on the line with the chicken and turkey. And I'm worried about the cross-contamination risk. And I'm like,
the chicken broth that's in something.
I know. And I was like, do you have any food in the back? And they were like, no, this is everything. And I was like, this is a problem. And so really, like, working with the dietitian was what allowed me to get onto a separately prepared meal plan, because we would workshop it. We'd be like, okay, what's working, what's not. And even once I was on that separately prepared meal plan, I struggled to get the right proportions of food. I struggled with all of my food being the same color and the same thing every day. And so I met with the dietitian probably once a week and to talk about like, what does, how can we do this better and how can we make food a more enjoyable experience? And so I think that's like my number one thing. The other thing, and this feels like intuitive and like, you've been told it your whole life and blah, 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 but I want to say it anyways. It's like, talk to your friends about food allergies. Like I mentioned earlier, like I like to make it a conversation starter. It doesn't have to be what you lead with. It doesn't have to be like, like Elise Buellesbach, food allergies. Like that doesn't have to be like your MO, but at least like bring it up in conversation. Because one of the first times my friends and I went out one night, we were going to go night monumenting and we wanted to go out to dinner first. And immediately they were like, Elise, you pick the restaurant. And like, that was it. There was no like, what's it going to be? How's it going to be safe? Well, we want to go here. It was just like, it's your call. Whatever you say works. That's what we'll do. And we ended up at a great restaurant that everyone really enjoyed called Busboys and Poets. It was lovely. Yeah. And, I think just like little experiences like that really matter. And I also found that like I'm on the club swim team in school, and I talk to people about food allergies a lot. There's a lot of people with food allergies on the team too, but I did an EpiPen training for my team before we went to our nationals trip because I'd never traveled with a swim meet, with a swim team before. And I was really nervous. I was like, I'm going to another city with like, I have to eat out, and I need other people to know this. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. Like, teach us, let's do this. And I think like, it's really cool to be in college because like you're suddenly with adults who are like functioning people and care. Like, people really care. And so when you talk about it, like, you're going to find other people who want to have these conversations and who want to, make sure that you're safe. And so really like it's nerve-wracking and like awkward sometimes to have those conversations, but it really does matter.
That there was so much wrapped into that, Elise. I love you. I mean, that was so good. And this is the wrong way to say it, but you're so adult. You speak the right language, you make it simple to understand. So thank you so much for that. And one of the things a couple of weeks ago, and actually her episode went live yesterday on the podcast, her name is blanking, but also from the FARE conference. And we talked about young professionals advocating for themselves in the workplace. And so I think everything that you've said today can 100% be applied to going to a new job, right? But there's not necessarily a dietitian on staff, right? You've got to talk to that HR manager. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the questions and I don't know if you were in that session or not, but, looking at going and finding a job, right? Are you going to tell and share your food allergy, your disability in the employment process, in the interview process, or are you going to wait to do that, once you've been hired? Because in that session at FARE, it was like, we want to be hired for us. We don't want to be hired not be hired because of a disability.
Absolutely. And I think that that's real. And I do think I was in that session. I recall this question. Personally, I talk about having food allergies a lot, but part of that like unique situation is that like a lot of my political work intersects with who I am as someone with food allergies. And so I want to share this story and this experience because I've not only had the opportunity to like create a difference in my community and for people who I am like, but also I've had the opportunity to learn about politics and, career-based things in the same lens. So I often talk about it, but I also often talk about it as like the reason I started going into politics. Like the first big political thing I did was lobby for the FASTER Act in 2019.
Wow.
Like the first meeting I had was with Representative Eshoo, and I thought I was meeting with a staffer. And I show up, it's in person back, yawn era of in person. And there's the representative sitting there at this table and like at this meeting. And I was like, what? And I had a phenomenal conversation. I got to share my story. And about midway through, the staffer who was sitting in on this meeting looks up from her food because she was eating lunch and was like, wait, this means you can't go down the street to the deli and grab lunch? And I was like, exactly. That's exactly it. And it was just such a light bulb moment. And I was like, this is so cool. And Representative Eshoo was the chair of the subcommittee on health, which is where the FASTER Act was sitting at the time. And so she's been really instrumental in making that happen. And so it was really neat to have that opportunity. And, after that experience in tandem with taking AP Gov, I was like, I've got to be in this. I've got to be a part of this. And I really just saw like the power that, intentional, thoughtful legislation can really have on people. And so so yes, I talk about food allergies in my work experience because I think for me, they're really connected. But that being said, like, I think it's real to not want to talk about them. And I think that that's really becomes a personal choice about, depending on the work environment or right. The type of job it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So many things to consider in that. But I mean, in that woman making that realization that she's eating her lunch and she just bought that, and that you can't necessarily go do that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to end with the question that I ask everybody is, and in thinking about everything that you said today, or in just in general, but what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you?
Yeah. Wow. I think for me, that's about finding joy in food. With food allergies, like food is not something that brings me joy often because it's so stressful. And I think, creating a space where I can ask these questions and that's normal, that's incredible. I went out to dinner the other night with a friend who also has celiac disease, and she ordered before me. And I was all like, yo, me too. And it was just so nice to be able to have that base understanding of I have food allergies, I have celiac disease, I got to do things a little differently, but it's totally doable. And I think to me, a safe, sustainable food environment is one where we have conversations about food allergies. We have conversations about what it means to have different dietary restrictions and how we can make safe food, because it's totally possible. I've seen it with FARE, I've seen it with other organizations. I know you talked about that as well. And I think continuing to have these conversations really helps to build a more inclusive environment, because at the end of the day, food should not be the reason to exclude someone. Let's make food safe, and let's make, our environment safer for people with food allergies.
Oh, you're amazing, and you're going to be a great politician or great government or whatever you end up doing. And to reiterate that, Catherine Walker just says, all of this is so important. Thank you for sharing your voice and shining a light on all these concerns. You're amazing.
Oh my gosh. Catherine's pretty epic too.
Yeah. So high five. So yeah. you know Catherine.
I do know Catherine. Okay. We have both been in the teen advisory group with FARE for quite a bit of time.
Awesome. Well, the two of you keep doing what you're doing, because it's making a difference. And everybody with food allergies, the 32 million Americans and the 250 million people around the world appreciate it. So thank you so much, Elise, for being here. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I think these conversations are what help create change and inspire inclusion. And so I'm so glad you're here having these discussions.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So everyone, until next time. Oh, and I did post the article, and I'm sorry, Lauren Soltwich, I just posted her link to the podcast that went live yesterday. So check that out. She's another young professional talking about food allergies, and it's a very important conversation, and it can be related to work. It can be related to events. It can be related to school, because we all have to eat. And we're not special people. We just need to eat a specific way. Right.
Exactly. I always like to say eating is not special. Eating is, basic. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But until next time, stay safe and eat well, and make sure you tell all your friends to download this podcast and listen. You can find it on all podcast platforms. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.